when he brought in El Cap, we actually took some time off from making the film. We actually took 6 months off to really think about it, because there are a lot of the questions about, you know, what if the filming either causes him to do something that he wouldn't normally do, or, you know, what if we accidentally, you know, swung into him while he's climbing, or, you know, just all the filming that's going to happen around the film if it got into his head and it caused a distraction. So there was a lot of kind of those ethical questions, and ultimately, you know, we came to a couple conclusions. One of them, you know, really was, I had a conversation with John Krakauer, who's a good friend and mentor, and he essentially said, look, is he going to do it anyways? And the answer was yes. And also, are you, you know, he asked, do you feel like you're in the best position to tell this story, and is this a story that's important? And we felt like it was clearly an important story. And just because I've been filming with Alex for almost 10 years and, you know, traveling the world with him, you know, we had a very good working rapport, and I think we had a lot of trust in seeing how, you know, Alex's decision-making process. And so the big question was whether or not we could trust Alex's decisions. And that question, you know, we answered, essentially, obviously, we said yes. So that's kind of how we went into it, but it took, you know, you wanted to be very thoughtful. We tried to look at it from a lot of different perspectives, but those are kind of like at the central core of it. We wouldn't have made, there's no way I would have gone into making the film if I didn't trust Alex implicitly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the way back.
What was the big difference between your 2016 push and your 2017 push?
Yes.
And, oh, sorry.
Go on.
And then also, like, second part, your relationship, sometimes it looked like it pulled away from where you were headed. Did that factor into it?
Yeah, okay, so I mean, the relationship, just to start with the hard stuff. So I mean, I'm still dating Sonny, things are great relationship, very, very healthy, despite what you may have seen on screen. I mean, and honestly, that's one of the hard things about watching the film for me, is that, I mean, some of the conversations that we have and some of the things I say to her early in the film, and we'd only been dating for a few months, and I've been dreaming about, you know, this climb for maybe 6 years at that point.
She met him during the production.
Yeah, so I mean, she's basically been dating me throughout this entire film process, like the 2 years that we were filming and then the year of post-production. It's like the 3 years of our relationship are all in this movie. And you're just like, whoa. And so, I mean, the 90-minute film doesn't really do justice to how much a life can change in 3 years. And so, you know, some of the things that I say to her at the beginning, you're like, oh, that's, you know, me watching it now, I'm like, I definitely cringe, because I'm like, that is unkind, and I should not say things like that. You know, the thing is, when I had just met this nice girl, you're sort of like, oh, you know, dating a month, like, who knows where that's gonna go. Yeah, but now looking back on it from 3 years, you're like, oh, I should be nicer. But don't worry, she knows it, she holds me to it. But so, what was the first part? Oh, the difference between the two attempts. Basically, it was just preparation. Like in the fall, in the 2016 attempt, I just wasn't really that prepared yet. And I still had the ankle injury, I couldn't quite feel my feet. There are a lot of things that just weren't quite right about it. Also, climbing Yosemite in the fall is fundamentally a little bit worse. Just the way the sun and the shade are. It's like colder conditions, so the rock is cold. But then it's shorter period of daylight before the sun actually hits the wall, and then it's too hot to climb. So basically you have to start by climbing in the dark, and it's just chilly. And then with my swollen foot and the cold temps, I couldn't feel my toes, and then you're trusting your life to this one foothold that you have to stand onto, and I was just like, not into that. And so, yeah, so then in the spring, I basically had 6 more months of training and preparation, and I knew the route better, but also conditions were fundamentally better then, because it's just warmer and more light, because the length of the day. But anyway, yeah, way back there.
I have a question for Jimmy. So, how is filming this movie as like, I guess, film art different from being a character in a movie like Meru, where you're actually like climbing? I guess, how do you deal with the stress or the different kinds of stress?
To be fair, he climbed for this one too a little bit, but just not.
Well, Meru is a lot different because we, you know, weren't really planning to make a feature documentary through most of the filming. And in this film, we were very intentional with like what kind of film we wanted to make. We knew we wanted to make a verite film where we were, you know, essentially filming Alex throughout. So it wasn't a constructed film. It was, you know, most of the scene, or all the scenes, you're in it, and you know, in a lot of ways, those are the most powerful. So we had an intention of like how we wanted to shoot it. We really wanted to push the shooting style, and we shot the whole thing in cinema cameras and cinema lenses. But it's different in a lot of ways because of that alone. But there was a lot more sense of responsibility because we were accountable to a studio, and it was a studio financed film. Like Meru, we weren't, you know, we kind of just were making it up as we went along. And but obviously, like having the responsibility of working with Alex on this really big project was also quite heavy. I mean, the burden that not just me, but the entire production felt, like, you know, we never really felt that on Meru, and this one, from the beginning, from the inception to the day that he climbed it, we were really kind of feeling the weight of what could go wrong. And you know, it's obviously I had a lot less control over. I wasn't climbing, and it was Alex. But like I said earlier, that you know, I really trusted in Alex's, not just his ability, but his decision making. And I think that is really critical. Like I trusted that he wouldn't go up there unless he was 100%, or at least he would turn around if he didn't feel like he could do it. And he wouldn't climb through because there was a bunch of camera and there's external pressure from the production.
Whatever there.
So it seems kind of some of the ethos around free soloing involves accepting death, accepting that we're all gonna die. Assuming they find something that lets you live forever, are you gonna keep free soloing?
Yeah.
And had something happened, would you guys still have made the film?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I've definitely thought about that before, and if I knew that I would live forever somehow, I mean, honestly, I would think a lot more about it. I mean, you know, because you're just gambling with such a bigger gift that way, in a way. But I don't know. I mean, that said, though, part of the preparation for Free Soloing El Cap was to get to the point where it felt totally comfortable, or it felt like 100%. And so, you know, when I did the climb, I did feel, you know, it felt like it was 100%. I mean, I know that rationally it was, you know, it was maybe 99, or who knows, you know, there's always some free chance that something could happen. But at least it felt like I was certain. I was like, I definitely can do this. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, you know, we'll see if that's ever an issue in our lifetimes. But I mean, I kind of hope it is. But speaking of ethics, you know. Yeah. Oh, and then whether or not they make the film, if I fell off, I'm like, who cares? You know, wouldn't bother me any.
He's like, yeah, that's your problem, Jimmy. But, you know, we had to think about that, and we had to think about that before we even started production, and we had to have these very kind of open and transparent conversations, you know, with National Geographic, our partner, and our kind of discussion around it was that, you know, we can't say that we would make it 100% for sure, because if it didn't feel appropriate, then we wouldn't make it. But it's hard to, you know, truly understand all the kind of variables around, you know, if Alex had fallen, like how we would feel, and we'd have to, you know, follow our instincts.
You'd feel freaking bummed.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be really, really hard to make. But then we also thought that, you know, if a film was going to be made, that we didn't really trust to hand it off to anybody else, so that if there was going to be a film made, we would make it. It wasn't for sure that we would make the film, and we were very clear about that.
Cool. Yeah, in the middle.
Do you have a new climbing goal, and also what do you like to climb in Utah?
Yeah, what do I like to climb in Utah? Well, so I mean, I moved to Vegas partially because of the proximity to southern Utah. I mean, some of the best climbing in the country is southern Utah. Though around Salt Lake, I mean, I mean, the canyons are obviously amazing. I've spent a lot of time there. But yeah, other big goals. I mean, basically not really. I hate to disappoint. There's no Free Solo 2 in the works, despite how great this one is. But no, I've just been
Free Solo 2.
But we've no, definitely not the Donwell. That's too much work. No, I've been just kind of taking on normal climbing challenges. I've been spending more time with my foundation, just kind of, working on other projects, quality time with my girlfriend. Living life basically, just sort of carrying along on all the things that were important to me throughout the whole project. Just because you climb a big route doesn't mean that really changes anything in the grand scheme of things. Yep. Yeah, that's
How were you at the editing of the movie and choosing some of these segments and?
No, if I'd been involved in editing, it would have just been 4 uncut hours of climbing on an El
Which is why we didn't let him into the editing.
So seriously, I had zero editorial control. I saw none of the material. I saw, throughout the 2 years that we were filming, I never saw any of the footage. I never saw, the beautiful drone shots in Morocco, nothing. And then basically I just saw the final film and I was like, good work, Yeah, definitely when I saw the final film the first time, there are a lot of things, like I said, that were kind of hard to watch, but overall it's as you saw, it's a very honest film. It's a very honest portrayal, and so, for better or for worse, I was like, well done team, I think they put a lot of trust in me to do the climb, and I put a lot of trust into them to make a good film, and I think, we both sort of did what we were supposed to do. But over there. Yeah.
Were you aware, both making and climbing it, obviously, that you're making history in the climbing world?
Yeah, I don't know. Of course I knew that no one had ever free soloed El Cap, and I wanted to be the first to some extent. I never think of it in terms of making history, but in climbing, doing a first ascent or breaking speed records or whatever, it's always nice to do something that no one else has done. And but with something like El Cap, a lot of it just comes down to just there's an elemental appeal to climbing on a wall that grand, especially for me coming from California. That's kind of a local, it's just such an iconic wall, and that is amazing. But yeah, being the first definitely factors into it. It's hard to untangle all the different motivations, because it's also sort of, for me at least, it was sort of the appropriately sized challenge. It was bigger than anything I'd done before, slightly harder than anything I'd done before, but also sort of the obvious next step. I'd done many things that led up to that, and so it just made sense, this was the next thing that I should work on. Yeah.
So, do you think what sets you apart as a climber is more your talent and your fitness, or your mentality and how you think about it? And if it is your mental, what is it exactly that you think? You have to narrow it down to one thing that's different about how you think, and how does that apply to your life outside of climbing?
Well, I don't know. Everybody feels normal on the inside. I think I'm just doing my thing. For sure, it's definitely not physical. I don't have any physical gifts as a climber. I can say that with certainty, Chris Sharma, who's basically the best climber in the world for the last 20 years, or at least was for 20 years through my childhood. After a year and a half of climbing, he did a route necessary evil in the U.S., which is the first 14C in the country, and that's he'd been climbing a year and a half. He's freakishly strong prodigy. Basically, after a year and a half, he was like, I'm not the best climber in the country. And I freaking have tried that route for 2 seasons, and I've been climbing for 20 years, and I put a lot of freaking work into climbing, and I still can't climb that route. And I'm just like, man, that's a true physical gift. And I was like, oh, somebody after a year and a half of climbing does the hardest thing in the country, and I put 20 years of work into it, and I still can't do that. And I'm like, that's so annoying that my fingers aren't that strong. But it's just, but on the other side, I've always loved adventure climbing. I've always loved big experiences in the mountains. I love, big walls and sort of the endurance aspect of it. And I think that I just love climbing. I've done an enormous volume of climbing in my life. I go out a lot, I climb a lot, and I like to, just like to go adventuring. And so I think that passion for it and that drive has sort of allowed me to do, things like this, because it just provides an enormous base of experience. But
If I'm going to add a couple things. Having kind of filmed and shot in this space for 20 years, like Alex said, on the inside he feels pretty normal, so it's kind of hard to contextualize for everybody, but, I just have never seen anything like what Alex can do. The way that Alex has rationalized it in front of a lot of audiences and to me, and sometimes I buy into it because I'm like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. He's like, oh, I get, I don't try to suppress the fear. I get so prepared that, I'm no longer afraid of doing it. So he wasn't, people ask, oh, what was the scariest part of the climb? And he's like, well, I wasn't really scared, But then I think of the, someone else or myself spending the next 10 years trying to, work out all the moves on that climb, or even much better climbers than me, nobody's gonna go free solo El Cap, So there is obviously, a mental aspect that Alex has, and we don't know if it's predisposed or not. I mean, the whole part about examining his amygdala, and clearly it didn't fire. It took a lot more stimulation to fire. They said it worked, but it took a lot more stimulation. But that part, is a little bit of a mystery to me, anyways. So.
Last question, I guess. Make it really good. Yeah, the very back is getting waved from both sides. That must be good.
First of all, thank you for telling the story. But secondly, why was it important for you to tell this story and share it with everybody?
Why was it important for me to share Free Solo? I mean, at the risk of sounding slightly ungrateful, I mean, it wasn't totally important to me to share the story, but it was kind of this great opportunity, and it's kind of like the right wall for it. I mean, I wanted to do justice to El Cap. I wanted, to see a freaking big wall on a big screen. I was like, if you're gonna see a climbing film in theaters, it's got to be the biggest wall possible. But a lot of it honestly just comes down to I don't even know what you call it, but just sort of the reality of life that so I mean, it has to do with timing. So a couple of the things, like, I've been dreaming about free soloing El Cap for many years, and had sort of lacked that. I kind of kept thinking that it was just going to happen. That one season I would drive in Yosemite and look up and be like, oh, it looks easy this year. Like, I'm sure it'll be fine. And after 6 years, I keep driving in and be like, that looks completely outrageous. I'm never going to do this. And I was like, at some point, I need to start actually putting the real effort in and trying to make it possible. And that happened to coincide with when they approached me about making a film. And in a lot of ways, it's actually easier to do all the work of preparing for the climb when you have people with you. And so whether they're filming or not, it just helps to have a partner. But none of my actual climbing friends are willing to spend the next 2 years just toiling on the side of El Cap with me just to help their friend. Because I mean, most of my good friends are good for a couple days here and there. They're like, oh yeah, I'll support you. We can do climb for a day. But then they're like,
I'm
okay,
a really good friend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, basically, I needed Jimmy and Mikey to be really good friends and go up there with me for 2 years. So I mean, a lot of it comes down to that aspect where it's just like, oh, it's honestly easier for me to achieve this big live stream if I do it with the team, basically. And so, I was like, it's gonna look amazing on screen, but I just want to see El Cap look great. But, last question. This guy seems psyched. Yeah. Yeah, where can you buy your mental armor? It's just 20 years of practice, It's a very cheap price. No, so in the film, I'm pretty sure I don't actually talk about
Tommy
mental armor.
said that.
Yeah, Tommy Caldwell has some lines where he's talking about mental armor, and it's kind of taken from a quote of mine from years ago in a different climbing film, and I think Tommy sort of borrowed it. But I actually don't really think of it in those terms anymore, and kind of what Jim was just describing, I feel like mental armor means that you get all psyched up and you do something even though it's scary to you. But my feeling with El Cap was that it's basically just too big and too daunting to sort of get psyched up and then perform. Because at some point, you're just going to run out of mental armor, you're going to get scared, I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of places on El Cap where you sit down, you pop your shoes on and off, you chill for a second, you take a bite of, drink water, a bite of food, then start climbing again. It's hard to maintain this like super psych mental armor for the whole 4 hours. And so instead of taking that approach, I sort of took the approach of preparing to the point where you don't really need armor, where you're like, this is normal to me, I can do this, and this is comfortable. And so it's a slightly different approach to managing fear, but I think in this case it was the way forward for me. Well, cool. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you for coming. I want to let you guys know that this documentary, obviously, the documentary spreads by word of mouth. These guys put a ton of effort into this. So if you guys liked it, enjoyed it, spread the word. Thank you guys for supporting the North Face Speaker Series.